inhibitor called aliskirenine. You all know about angiotensin 1 being converted to angiotensin 2, and you can block this by blocking the converting enzymes by drugs like captopril, enalapril, lisinopril, benzapril, peridentopril, and so on, all prils. Then angiotensin 2 comes out and acts on receptor. We have receptor blockage in forms of sartans, losartan, telmisartan, olmesartan, and all those things. Beyond that, when it stimulates aldosterone, we have aldosterone antagonist blocking and preventing the deleterious effect of aldosterone on peripheral tissue. The ACE inhibitors were wonder drugs, probably the molecules of millennium, which have established themselves through the various trials. And there's a sound data at the end of meta-analysis of the pooled data of various trials gathered together. It has a sound biological rationale, but they are underutilized. Now, they reduce blood pressure, they have direct vasoprotective effect, they decrease vascular and cardiac hypertrophy, they stabilize plaques, enhance endogenous fibrinolysis, and improves diabetes control. This has been proved in various randomized controlled trials conducted on LV dysfunction in congestive heart failure. They reduce proteinuria, and thereby they retard the progression of renal disease. They reduce glomerular hypertension, and they retard glomerulosclerosis, to be very specific. So they have various action. They actually promote NO to counteract the bad effect of angiotensin 2 and bring balance to normal. This is how they act on efferent and afferent artery. In some effect, the intraglomerular hypertension is reduced by these wonder molecules. We have conducted a trial late in 1996 where captopril was tried against placebo after the attack of myocardial infarction. And it has really helped to prevent LV remodeling at the end of myocardial infarction. We have also studied its effect on proteinuria and diabetic and non-diabetic renal diseases. Both were promising. It reduced microalbuminuria, also it reduced overt proteinuria, and in the end, it deaccelerated the progression of renal disease independent of their effect on BP control. The landmark trial, HOPE trial, it was a double-blind 2x2 factorial randomized trial involving 9,541 patients, which had a follow-up of 4.5 years. And this is a landmark study with a broad population of CV high-risk patients and diabetes mellitus with preserved LV function. What has this demonstrated is that combined endpoint, the drug which was used in HOPE was ramipril versus placebo. The combined cardiovascular endpoints decreased by 22%, statistically significantly so. Cardiovascular mortality decreased by 26%, myocardial infarction decreased by 20%, and stroke incidence decreased by 32%. So it was a significant attachment. The ramipril was given in 4,645 patients, and placebo was administered in 4,652 patients. And it had an average follow-up of 4.5 years. There is now overwhelming evidence that ramipril prevents CV deaths, myocardial infarction, stroke, heart failure. It accelerates revascularization, and it also allays development of overt DM and its complication of microvascular form, and it also retards to some extent nephropathy. Now, these benefits are consistent and statistically robust and are observed in a broad range of CV high-risk population in addition to the effective treatment therein. Now, therefore, we have evidence which is available, and we follow the guidelines of evidence-based medicine. Unfortunately, this robust evidence has not been translated into practice guidelines till now. The offshoot of HOPE trial was in micro-HOPE, where this drug was looked after specially in a subgroup who had diabetes, and it reduced proteinuria by 24% as against the placebo, and there was a risk reduction which was significant as compared to placebo. Meta-analysis of all the pooled results suggests that ACE inhibitors decrease proteinuria in early diabetic nephropathy. If therapy is initiated at the stage of microalbuminuria, it retards the progress to overt proteinuria. ACE inhibitors retard progression of diabetic nephropathy and delays onset of end-stage renal disease. The results of results are also extrapolated in non-diabetic renal diseases. It does the same to non-diabetic renal diseases. Initial studies were focused on diabetic renal diseases. The meta-analysis has a robust statistical support to say that ACE inhibitors are the drug of choice in this situation. And it has a definite antiproteinuric advantage beyond that attributable to their BP lowering effect. On-target trial, which endorses telmisartan's benefit in reducing CV morbidity and mortality. Actually, on-target trial translated the hope or translocated the results that have been obtained at the end of HOPE trial, and the drug which was used was telmisartan. That was the only difference. So at the end of the results, they found telmisartan is a safe and effective alternative to ramipril. Telmisartan is at least as effective as ramipril. This was a non-inferiority trial. And telmisartan has low rates of cough and angioedema, hence better tolerated than ramipril. HOPE results were achieved and reproduced in on-target trial. This is what it demonstrated. You see that curve, cumulative hazard rates increasing, ramipril versus telmisartan. There is hardly any difference over a period of time. There was no additional advantage, at least in this study, on-target study, when telmisartan was combined with ramipril. It was as same as ramipril alone or telmisartan alone. There are three important trials you have to look at, and these are very statistically robust trials. Transdate trial, which compared telmisartan with placebo, on-target trial, which compared telmisartan with ramipril, and HOPE trial, which compared ramipril with placebo. You see the difference in telmisartan and placebo group in Transdate trial. In target, virtually the same, comparable result with telmisartan and ramipril. In HOPE trial, ramipril has got an edge over placebo, naturally so. These are the three landmark trials which have provided us an evidence to use this molecule extensively, because the broad range of population was covered in all three trials. There are the other trials involving olmesartan, roadmap trial, which has demonstrated the beneficial effect of olmesartan in cardiovascular morbidity and mortality as a whole. Olmesartan, if started earlier, can prevent microalbuminuria in experimental rat before overt proteinuria manifests. And there are some very important lab parameters which were shown to have a positive effect with olmesartan therapy. So even with good BP control, hypertensive patients may remain at elevated risk. And to combat that elevated risk, RAS blockers such as ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers have proven their value in protecting heart and kidneys. More complete RAS control may further improve organ protection. That was the thought. That's how the drug eliskenin came in picture, because it blocks renin altogether. But there were no significant advantages demonstrated when it is used against ARB or ACE inhibitors. The CV protection, the drug class have different effect that we have talked about. Here you see the biggest bars being of ACE inhibitors and ARBs. Here you see the JNC5 report recommending ACE inhibitors for all hypertensive patients who have heart failure, post-myocardial infarction period, high coronary disease risk, diabetes, chronic disease, and recurrent stroke prevention. This was published much earlier before the on-target trial and Transdate results were published. So this column, which is blank in ARB on few occasions, is now full. So those results were extrapolated there. You see the recommendation, target blood pressure, recommended by various professional organizations. There is a goal BP which is to be achieved, and if you read this column, all first choice drugs are ACE inhibitors and ARBs down the line till JNC6. This is how the guideline starts. If you have a systolic blood pressure less than 20 millimeters above the goal, the first is to start ARB or ACE inhibitors, and then upward goes. No effect, add long-acting thiazide diuretic and titrate up. No result, then consider aldosterone receptor blocker. If CCB is used, add another group of CCBs. And that's how, and the last result will be to add vasodilator drug like minoxidil or hydroxyzine. This shows the same RAS activation and the molecule which acts as a different level. Now, dual blockade of renin-angiotensin system, is combination therapy superior to maximum dose monotherapy? Although most of the studies demonstrate renal benefit with dual blockade, maximal ACE inhibition has not been used in all studies. Those are the drawbacks of studies. So we are at present premature to conclude whether combining these two drugs will offer any long-term benefit to all of our patients. These are some issues where the dual block. Now this is very important slide. I borrowed from Dr. M.K. Mani, 2012. This shows diabetic nephropathy, decline in renal function. Before ACE inhibitors came in picture till 1993, the decline in GFR was very sharp. You find it coming down from 50 to almost zero or near zero within 4 years. The ACE was increasingly used by practitioners, and in 2012, where the ACE patient, the patient receives intermittent ACE therapy, guarding, looking at serum creatinine and potassium, the GFR decline was deaccelerated, and we had bought 2 or 3 years' time more before end-stage renal disease was achieved. Now, some of these patients, the nephrologists started using intensive ACE therapy, and you look at this curve, from 50 ml, almost 14 years' time before GFR declined significantly, because this is a cutoff where patient probably cannot survive without dialysis or transplantation. In a country like ours, where we can't afford to treat many ESRD by dialysis and transplant infrastructure is so poor, this is a very important slide which tells you that you should use maximum ACE inhibition, if not possible ARBs, in combination with on-oral screening or complete renal blockade to deaccelerate the progress of renal dysfunction. Same thing replicated in chronic glomerulonephritis. With use, we buy more and more years so that we delay the onset of dialysis and end-stage renal disease in these patients. Interstitial nephritis, more encouraging result, 40 years time. Chronic interstitial nephritis is otherwise a very slow progression, has a slow progression compared to glomerulonephritis and diabetic nephropathy. But look at those 3 lines. I mean, the results are so excellent and so robust that we should implement ACE and ARB therapies in all these situations. These are some trials where L-screening was added. You see the light blue bar with ramipril, red with L-screening, and combination. Combination has given maximum benefit in this trial. So the ramipril was combined with L-screening, and you see this line bar here showing maximum benefit at the end of the trial. Same thing, this was valsartan which was combined with L-screening, and you have maximum benefit when compared to alone L-screening, alone valsartan or placebo. It has an additive BP lowering effect when combined with major antihypertensive class. Now, still it is premature to say whether L-screening alone can be used as a substitute for ACE inhibitor or ARBs. There are various trials underway. I'm sure Dr. Suryavanshi sitting here is one of the investigators for Atmosphere trial. Unfortunately, I wasn't PI in Apollo, but it has been terminated because of several issues. But there are several trials going on with this molecule, which is a direct renin inhibitor. There are other ways to do it. Now we know that through N type of channel, calcium channel blocker, the angiotensin 2 is stimulated. So you can use 4th generation calcium channel blockers like cilnidipine to block that local angiotensin liberation cycle and have the same benefit. And if you make the combination of ACE inhibitors and 4th generation calcium channel blockers or ARBs and 4th generation calcium blockers, then maximum benefits could be derived. Ultimately, you need to also act against aldosterone because it has its own deleterious effects. And by inhibition of aldosterone by MRBs, spironolactone, epileron, you can achieve maximum benefit of total RAS blockade. There are some concern, like when in renal dysfunction we say that if you put them on ACE inhibitors, there is a rise in serum creatinine. That's how the drug acts. They decrease the intraglomerular pressure, so you expect 30% incremental decline in GFR. And if it is not more than 30%, you relax. The only precaution you have to take is that potassium should not cross the normal range. These are the two things you have to look after. And for first few months, you have to keep monitoring this patient on GFR front. If you're not monitoring GFR, you see the serum creatinine rise not more than 1.5 to 2 milligrams per DL if you cannot calculate estimated GFR. Otherwise, we have seen those 3 slides where the benefits were maximum for controlling the deterioration in renal function. There are other issues like cough, which is very common, less with ARBs, but I suppose if you combine them with calcium channel blockers, some of these side effects can be taken away. And despite the concerns which are largely taken care of by choosing right patient, close monitoring and follow-up, because of overwhelming evidence that ACE, ARBs prevent CV death, myocardial infarction, stroke, heart failure, revascularization processes, cardiac arrest, diabetic microvascular complication, nephropathy, reduced proteinuria, and deaccelerate glomerulosclerosis in non-diabetic renal diseases. And because of concept of vasoprotection and endothelial and tissue protection with ACE, ARBs, and RAS blockade, the RAS blockade advantage should be given to all those patients who need it and deserve it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You spared such a valuable time in pre-lunch period. Thank you for patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for your deliberations. We have witnessed the era from simple Rezerpin, that is Adalphane, Aldomate, beta blocker, calcium channel blocker, RAS blockade, and yesterday we have heard about these renal denervations, also surgical interventions. Any questions from house?
ARB and ACE inhibitors, which one is better for proteinuria?
Speak loudly.
ACE inhibitors and ARBs, which one is better or superior for proteinuria?
I'll speak it. At least in trials which have evidence that, we can say, there are various comparative terms which we used, that telmisartan is at least as effective as ramipril. That's how we make a statement, because it was a non-inferiority trial. It wasn't superiority trial, or it was an equivalence trial, but it was a non-inferiority design to make a statement that telmisartan is as effective as ramipril. So these results have been extrapolated from hope to on target. So we have equally effective drugs, probably we can say that with some confidence, that telmisartan or ARBs and ACE inhibitors are equally potent in reducing proteinuria.
I request Dr. T.C. Rathod sir and Dr. Karya sir to felicitate Dr. V.L. Gupta sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
The next lecture is on antibiotic resistance. I request Dr. B.D. Wag sir to come on dais.
Sorry.
Dr. Wag sir.
Hello. Because of time constraints, I would not like to introduce the subject. The name of the subject itself suggests what is there in the store, and Dr. Mishra will unravel the mystery of all these things and will be much helpful in management of day-to-day practice. I request Dr. Mishra to start.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. I would like to express my thanks to the organizers for having given this opportunity to me to be here before you all speaking on this important topic of antibiotic resistance, which I feel is important for two reasons. The first being this phenomenon of antibiotic resistance is our own creation, and if we do not take proper steps and put in measures to prevent further progression, we are really heading for what I have mentioned as beginning of a post-antibiotic era, which is going to be much worse than pre-antibiotic era. So are we heading for a post-antibiotic era, or this phenomenon of antibiotic resistance, is it the beginning of post-antibiotic era? I shall not go into much details about this. All of us know that as physicians, the most commonest drug we use in our practice are antibiotics or antibacterials. And the world antibiotic market will reach 34 billion euros in 2016. Unfortunately, indiscriminate use has led to emergence of drug resistance, and rational use of antibiotics is of paramount importance. This just tells how antibiotics got developed. People observed a phenomenon of antibiosis, bacteria producing substances which worked against microorganisms. That was the phenomenon of antibiosis, and that is how antibiotics got developed. 1909, Paul Ehrlich with his magic bullets. This was not an antibiotic. These were arsenical compounds, and all of us know that they were used to cure syphilis, which was rampant at that time. And from 1909 to 2010, we have seen a journey of various antibiotics being introduced, the latest being telavancin. And unfortunately, there is nothing much in the pipeline. So that makes things all the more dangerous. We had antibiotics, we had a powerful tool in our hand, and this slide tells you that how antibiotics have increased the longevity of life in 20th century. Almost there is doubling of longevity of life in 20th century, and most of this has been due to the use of antibiotics. But antibiotics were powerful tools, and power coming in our hands made us really not control it properly. Abuse of power has led to antibiotic resistance. So what have we done? From 1909 to 2010, we had a series of several antibiotics coming up in our hands, but we have not used them. The reality is antibiotic resistance has reached critical levels. This is the warning which has come from WHO, and India should devise plan to tackle antimicrobial resistance. This is the status of affairs today. The onus is on us that having created sort of Bhasmasur, now we have to control it. So these are the global infectious diseases: respiratory infections, HIV, diarrheal diseases, tuberculosis, malaria. And you see, over a period of time, there has been emergence of drug resistance to all of these diseases. These are the most common causes of mortality in developing part of the world, and all of them have shown becoming multi-drug resistant. Right from respiratory infections to malaria, even MRSA. In India, the rates have increased. Methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus prevalence has been going up as in the last decade or so. Then the resistance pattern to common infectious agents like Klebsiella and E. coli also has been increasing in the last few years. Resistance to E. coli, all these are Indian data. This is not a data which we have borrowed from some other country, but this is Indian data, so becomes relevant to all of us. And these are the culture reports which we have got it done in Nagpur, which shows growth of all bacteria commonly found. Even community-acquired infections have become multi-drug resistant, and the only antibiotic to which at times they are sensitive is colistin, tigecycline, and amongst gram-positive, there's hardly any antibiotic. Even staphylococci are becoming resistant to vancomycin. So these are some of the culture reports which we have seen, which we have obtained in Nagpur. So this is a data which is relevant to all of us, having grown organisms which are multi-drug resistant. So bacterial resistance, basically we should not blame bacteria for this phenomenon. Bacteria, we have invaded their region. Bacteria came into this universe millions of years before we came into existence. So in fact, we are invading they are fighting for their life. So they will show a phenomenon of bacterial resistance, which can be both intrinsic or can be acquired. We will not devote a lot of time to this. This is how bacteria acquire resistance, either through mutations or through transfer of resistant genes, either by plasmids or by transposons or by bacteriophages. So this is how they develop resistance and they transfer. They create a sort of an army to fight for their survival. So basically, bacteria are fighting for their survival. We shouldn't be blaming them. Mechanisms of resistance which bacteria develop are plenty, the most common being inactivation of the drug, alteration of the binding site for the drug, producing a drug-insensitive target, decreasing the permeability of the bacterial cell to the drug, and lastly, they are throwing the drug out. They are throwing the drug out. The active efflux of the drug outside the bacterial cell is a pretty common mechanism through which bacteria have developed resistance. This shows how antimicrobial exposure selects resistant strain, especially if the drug given has achievable concentration very close to the minimum inhibitory concentration, then emergence of resistant strains become very common. The susceptible strains get killed, and you have resistant strains which then transfer the resistant genes through horizontally to other bacteria. Evolution of drug resistance in Staphylococcus aureus, the worst thing is, it is 1950s it was introduced, and in about 60 years, you would be having vancomycin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. So if a person gets a scratch on his knee, a child gets a scratch on his knees and gets infected with staph, then we are going back to pre-antibiotic era when a simple wound would become lethal. So this is just a signboard in a hospital, accident and emergency to the right, ENT department to the left, and MRSA everywhere. So this will become a reality. In fact, might have become a reality. So this should not be taken as a cartoon, but it could be a real life situation. Unfortunately, the other part of the story, the antibiotic development is dwindling. We see from 1983 to 1987, we had 15 almost newer antibiotics which were introduced. And now, between 2008 to 2012, there were only 4 antibiotics which were introduced. So situation is, this is double trouble. Bacteria are becoming resistant, and you hardly have any newer weapons in your armamentarium to fight this resistance. So double trouble awaits us. What's in the pipeline? Hardly anything. With nothing in the pipeline and bacteria throwing the drug out, bacteria throwing the drug out is like a slap on your face. They're throwing the drug out of the cell, and there is nothing in the pipeline, so one can really feel concerned that are we really heading for a post-antibiotic era, which will be nothing short of a Holocaust. And as early as 1945, the discoverer of penicillin, Alexander Fleming, had warned in an interview in the New York Times that the misuse of penicillin could lead to selection of resistant forms of bacteria. So this was a warning given to us way back in 1945, but the power in our hand made us really now run amok with antibacteria, and the situation is what we all are experiencing now. So this is what WHO Director General Margaret Chan had said, that things as common as strep throat or a child's scratched knee could kill once again. Hip replacement, organ transplants, cancer chemotherapy, and care of preterm infants would become far more difficult or even too dangerous to undertake. So this could be a situation a few years from now. This is just an impact of what will happen. Current varieties of resistant bacteria kill more than 20